All right, so our second section here is called Connection. Very good. Joseph got that for us. Um, I feel very connected to Relevant Coffee right now for doing this for me. Um, I am going to read off Casey's bio so that we can get to know a little bit about him if you don't know him at all. And then, Casey, you feel ready?
You bet.
Okay. So, Casey's got a lot of companies and organizations that he's got his hand in, but specifically for this, we're going to reference that he is principal at RIF. Casey's passion for community involvement, especially in his hometown and personal favorite place of Vancouver, is boundless. So this is why he wants to help local businesses in today's struggling economy. Between the 60 plus experts who work at RIF and Casey's own 24 years of professional service experience, they know that their knowledge of design, development, and strategy can help mature startups and established businesses reposition themselves to find emerging opportunities. So, Casey, does that feel like it reflects you well? You feel reflected in that?
Pretty good. I've got a few edits I'll make, but I'll save that for
Perfect.
What little I have to share. So,
okay, well then, Casey, let's go ahead. We've got about 15 to 20 minutes for Casey to present, and then we will introduce the rest of the panelists for section 2.
Well, thanks. And first off, man, I wish I could see everyone's face that's participating. It's a handsome group of panelists, and the rest of you, I'm sure, likewise. So maybe I thought I would just start by sharing a little bit about myself. As from strictly a digital agency perspective, I'm probably the least qualified person to be presenting today. I graduated from WSU, go Cougs, with degrees in architecture. My wife, Melanie, and I have 5 kids and 1 grandchild. So yes, that means I probably graduated college before many of you were born. I enjoy running, art, cooking. I think most importantly for me, I feel like I retired when I was 22 years old, in part because I just absolutely love what I do. I think 10 years ago, if you asked me what I did, I would have said I'm an architect. Now, I think if you ask me, I'll likely pause, which is my natural speech cadence, but it's not because I don't know. I think it's because if I reflect about the things I'm involved with and try to describe it, it feels like it's boastful or something. But here's what I know is I love people. I love Vancouver. And I'm really motivated to encourage others towards a hopeful future. So in terms of what I do, I think at the heart, I think that's what I do. It also happens that I'm a principal with LSW Architects, and this is the edit to the introduction. So LSW, we have 55 of the most amazing people I've ever had a chance to work with. Also a co-founder of Ride, local transportation company. Help kick up Design Vancouver, which is, I think, Vancouver's first multidisciplinary design conference. Have a publication we've started called The Section Magazine. And lastly, and for the context of today, a founder of RIF, a creative studio that does serve both startups and legacy kind of established businesses. And there we only have 15, but they're the most creative 15 people I've ever worked with. So the session title is Connection. And I was thinking a little bit about what kind of connection are we talking about? There's a light connection, like maybe after, I think Dawn referenced dating at some point. There's the after a first date, hey, I think she and I made a connection. Or there's a deep connection, and like a long-lasting, committed relationship. Maybe like a marriage. And so, I think that the thing I'm most interested in is really those deeper, longer-lasting relationships. Obviously, they both have their place, and it's you don't get to the last one unless you started with the first one. But I really feel that in this time when we live in a world of transactions, a world of snap judgments, of first impressions, there's really tremendous power, opportunity, innovation that you can find through deep, committed business relationships. So here's my thesis, and I think what I have to share is pretty short and sweet, but I'm going to repeat myself a few times because I think it was worth helpful for me to reflect on these things at least. So my thesis is that authentic relationships driven by a motivation to see others succeed will have exponential results for everyone. So authentic relationships, the second point, motivated to see others succeed. And then the third is yield exponential results. So if I were to break this down a little bit, authentic relationships for me might look like shared experiences. So showing up in the places where you have genuine interest and passion. If you love dogs, volunteer at the Humane Society. Chances are you'll probably build some shared experiences with others that love dogs. The other would be shared values. And this was all these things were referenced in the first presentation today. So I feel like I'm dogpiling on, which is maybe okay. But so shared experiences and then shared values. Shared values is like, what do you really care about? If you care about maybe the environment, talk about it, walk the walk like you care about the environment, and you'll find that others do too. You'll stand out in that way, and others will see that. And then the third part maybe of authentic relationships might be a sense of shared vision. What do you want the future to look like? Share it. Tell others about it. Pretty good chance, from my own experience, most people will think you're crazy, but others will feel like, hey, I finally met my long-lost relative. So I think that authentic relationships, thinking about shared experiences, showing up, shared values, and shared vision, for me, those are key parts. The second kind of thesis bullet for me was, are we motivated to see others succeed? So for me, I think what this might look like is, with everyone you meet, ask yourself, what do they need to succeed? That's a muscle that you have to exercise. And I think once you've exercised the muscle, it's really easy to walk into a situation and any thoughts about your own expectations naturally become secondary. But as you think about what they need to succeed, if you have it, or if you know where they can find it, simply just let them know. The other thought as it relates to being motivated to see others succeed is recognizing what superpowers or gifts or talents or abilities do others have. So what I mean is, if you can help find opportunities for them to operate in those areas of unique ability, that's going to be something that they'll appreciate. And likewise, as you think about yourself, focus on those things where you find energy, play to your own strengths. And I think, as it was referenced in the first session today, because in recognition, this is a team sport. I think to say stay in your lane feels a little constrictive, but I think it's really stick close to those things where they give you energy and you can just keep on doing it and it doesn't kind of suck your will to live. I'm guessing for most of us, if you did an inventory of all your activities throughout the day, probably 20% hopefully is in that category. And you've probably got 80% that you would gladly hand off to anybody else. So I think that might be a good roadmap for you to think about those things you can stop doing, but also recognize that those things are likely somebody else's unique ability. Those things that are not yours is somebody else's passion. And when you can fit those puzzle pieces together, you start to see some results. And so that's the last bullet, was exponential results. I think about it almost like an equation, but when you have strong relationships and you're focused on providing opportunities for others, you find yourself the recipient of time and resources. And time and resources really can help you know how to become the best version of yourself. And as you start to get some traction there, instead of piling it up for yourself, consider kind of upping your game. Seek to give more. I think generosity was referenced the last session. Also, gratitude has tremendous power. So as you build strong relationships, provide opportunities for others, you start seeing the shared benefits of those coming back. Consider upping your game, giving more, leaning more into the common good, and maybe in ways that that feels uncomfortable. Think rather aggressively and boldly in terms of those areas that will have lasting impact. I know we've got a really phenomenal panel today. I'm very excited to get out of their way and let you ask some questions of them and hear from them. They represent a really diverse range of skills and abilities. In the little bit of time I've spent with them, I've started to also already kind of sleuth out what their unique abilities, in my perspective, might be. So I'm excited to hear from them and ultimately from each of you. So in closing, and I'm pretty inept with this chat channel, so I'm going to have to pick that up later. But in closing, I think just authentic relationships driven by a motivation to see others succeed, having exponential results for everyone. And thank you for the opportunity today.
Well, I'm glad.
Casey, it's all you.
Casey, I'm glad you can't see the chat section because everyone is just telling you that you're doing horrible. That nobody's really getting anything positive. No, it's the opposite.
I know you too well, so.
Oh, no, everybody was really, really grateful. Jeremy, can you start letting everybody else in? So panelists, if you want to start putting on your video and your microphones, I will start introducing everybody. If that app worked better, I'd give you the double tap for the extra applause. Okay. So you get good applause for that one. So we're bringing on everybody in the panel, and Jeremy, if you can also turn to gallery view for everybody. So if you are not seeing gallery view, let us know in the chat section because we want to make sure that you are seeing everybody's wonderful faces. And I am going to go ahead and introduce everybody. So I'll start. Let's see. I like to start here. Let's start with Ellen. So Ellen, give everybody a little wave. Yes, that's Hi. Ellen there. So Ellen is the founder of Cubicle to CEO. She teaches service-based entrepreneurs how to attract consistent clients. As an anti-guru marketer, Ellen helps you simplify your marketing so you can get out of the client-chasing cycle, moving from selling to serving. It's a pivot that everybody needs right now. She also hosts the award-winning Cubicle to CEO podcast. So, Miss Ellen. Now I'm going to move to Ryan. Ryan, can you say hi to everybody? So this is Ryan Reed. Ryan has an MBA and is the founder and CEO of Ryan Reed and Company. If Ryan isn't presenting at Harvard, recording her Reminisce podcast, or volunteering her time, she's empowering individuals and organizations to live up to their potential. She helps clients. I got distracted in the chat for a second. She helps clients grow with career coaching as well as web design and social media services to help them advance their brand. So that is Ryan. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, next is Alan. Alan, can you give them a nice little wave so everybody knows who you are? Okay, so Alan is the director of growth at Gravitate. And I should mention this pillar, this section 2, is technically sponsored by Gravitate as well. They've put money towards this, and some of that is going right into the nonprofits that we have mentioned today. Also, I'm seeing Lindsay here in the chat say that it keeps jumping from gallery to speaker view. So let me know if anybody else is experiencing that as well. Nicholas, they both say same for them. So stop messing with it, Jeremy. Just get it right. He wants to know if it's in gallery view now. There we go. There we go. Okay. See, all I had to do was yell at him and things are fine. Okay, so Alan, Director of Growth at Gravitate. In 2019, Gravitate acquired Alan's boutique agency, bringing him on as their Director of Growth. He's using his experience to help clients adapt their current strategy for today's disruptive climate. He sits on the board of the CREDC, which is another one of the nonprofits that we're donating to. He's been instrumental in distributing resources for the business community. So that's Alan. Now let's move to Matt. Matt, can you say hi to everybody? So Matt Cole is the founder and creative director of Revere. With a career in design and marketing spanning 15 years, Matt is an industry veteran with a proven track record of leading creative teams. As a native of Clark County, he brings his intimate understanding of the Pacific Northwest culture to his work in brand development, handcrafted design, web solutions, and more. And then we've got two more. So Brian Ferdinand, can you say hi, Brian? Brian is a partner and technical director at Shop. That's the same company that Aaron from our last panel was on. Brian's vast array of expertise from different careers in a variety of industries enables him to see varied perspectives when approaching business problems. He brings his actionable solutions mindset to his multifaceted digital marketing work at Shop. Last one is Mark. Mark, can you say hi to everybody? Okay, so this is Mark Neidlinger. He is the owner of Orange Nebula. The projects Mark takes on at Orange Nebula are meant to incite action, lower personal barriers, invite conversation, and be more targeted and less limiting. Fueled by passion and committed to following through, they create projects aimed to inspire people to think bigger. So that is Mark. Okay, so that's everybody on our panel. I know it's impressive. I'm impressed. I'm intimidated. At least I have snacks. I hope everybody else, all the other attendees, have snacks so that they can, get their nervous energy out with snacks. Okay, so everybody can unmute now because I would like you to be able to talk amongst yourself. Only keep yourself muted if your dog is barking or whatever. So I would love to start this section over at Mark. Mark, you have kind of done this transition that people are doing right now a few years in advance, right? You've had this service-based industry for a while, and then you've built more of an online community over the last few years. So I'm wondering if you can speak for a minute while I organize some of the other questions about what it's like moving from an in-person service-based business to having these worldwide connections with people maybe you've never met before.
Sure. Well, first, let me say, Casey, who presented in this section, is a friend of mine, and let me tell you why I hate him. Is now because I have to follow him, and I feel like we should all just listen to him for the rest of the day. But I, on the other hand, have spent most of my life learning things the hard way. Fortunately, one of those things is that sometimes the best things in life come out of our darkest times, and the pressure that we feel shows us what we're capable of, and sometimes sets us back on the right path, even if that's the new path. So sometimes it's not back to the path, it's onto the right path. And so I come from the design world, creative agency life, branding, design for 20 years or something like that. And during that time, I've had the luxury of face-to-face, in-person, local business. And so I feel like I've really spent a lot of time living under that privilege of being able to see someone face-to-face, read their body language, and communicate with them. And that's been a tool that I had with me for years and years. And about 4 years ago, we started evolving, and we found success selling our products in the crowdfunding space globally, right? So in 70-some countries now. And so we had to adapt and learn very quickly that crowdfunding means to fund, you need a crowd, and you can't do face-to-face. And so we spent a lot of time learning and adapting. Some of the mistakes that we learned the hard way, and some of the mistakes we see companies make during a transition, is assuming that the strength of their offering is enough. And so sometimes we get an opportunity to help, especially in the crowdfunding space. People are really trying hard to just fund really well, really big, when they're coming out of nowhere. And the truth is, you're planting seeds, you're cultivating them, and then the harvest always comes in a different season. And so, to build trust takes building trust, right? The building part is the part that people want to skip. But I just feel like with my company in particular, I came from a space where I felt like I had a lot of things figured out because I learned them the hard way. But then life changed, and it set me in a new direction. And some of it came from a dark time and a broken time and the part when I wasn't at my best. But that has been the best thing that happened to me. And I'm hoping that as we come out of this COVID stuff, that's other people's story. And so, like Casey said, if you can be motivated by other people's success, that exponential return is kind of like a harvest for me. It comes in a different season. So let's get planting and cultivating.
Oh, I like that a lot. Okay, so one question that I have here from registration, I wanted to pose to the group, and I'll ask it, and anybody who has a good answer can give it. And if nobody volunteers, I'll volunteer you. Okay. So the question that I had here that I thought fit very, very well is, let me find it. Let me find the right one. Okay. Because this has to do with connection, talking to our customers, talking to our communities. How will customer experiences likely universally change following this time? So as opposed to like what's happening right now, how is this time going to change the way that we communicate with our customers, our clients, our partners moving forward?
I can kick things off.
Thank you.
I thought Matt was going to jump on it, but apparently not.
Almost did.
Yeah, so two things there. A couple things that are super relevant right now, obviously. Everybody's moving online and digital. I don't think that's going to go away. I'm obviously biased at a digital agency, but there's a huge shift. And I think what that is even when things start opening back up, you're going to have some sort of digital presence. You're going to have some sort of like e-commerce or online ordering extension of your business. Like it can't just be a brick and mortar business, or you're missing out on a huge portion of the market. I feel like that's kind of been the trend leading up to this. And this is kind of like the shove off the cliff for that to happen. So hopefully everybody is taking the time now to invest into, responding now, but also in the long term. The second piece that I think changes a lot, and this is coming out a bunch, especially on social media, is being authentic. Right now, it's a super hot item, I think, ever since like Tom's came out, to be nonprofit driven. And there's a good portion of people that do it and they're authentic about it. And there's a good portion of people that do it because they have to. The example that I gave earlier was Ruth's Chris, right? Shake Shack gave back the PPP loan, and Ruth's Chris is like, oh, we're going to look terrible if we don't do that. So we did the same thing. Now they're just getting roasted online. It's the same thing. I've said time and time again, like, consumers are smart. They know if you're inauthentic about it. So just be authentic. And I'm obviously a huge fan of being nonprofit driven as a section of your business, regardless of what you're doing. I feel like that's going to be really important after this whole COVID thing is over.
Matt, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I'll add to that too. I mean, really, like Alan, you hit the nail on the head. Digital is kind of like seeing the transition, but I think that digital curtain now is thinner than maybe it was a month or two ago, right? We've always been able to kind of like, I think somebody said in the last panel where, you didn't always have your camera on when you did a video call. You didn't always have to kind of be up front or up close and personal because you had that sort of digital sort of curtain in front of you. And now we're kind of forced to come out of that and be more transparent with who we are, and be more like us, be more virtual with how we interact with people. And that means turning the camera on. It means that we have to find ways to relate or connect with people in a digital way where we would do it in person before. I mean, we did it last month as a group, that tag as a group, and we've had like a monthly happy hour. We started doing those online too, and they felt very natural. Other than the fact that I couldn't order my favorite old fashioned from Barlow House, but it is a way. It did feel like a way to connect with people and to interact in more of a natural way. And so I think that digital curtain has been thinned a little bit.
I know one thing that I have found, and I'm interested if some of you are curious about it too, is I actually thought that maybe some of my own personal fulfillment mostly came from this in-person, interpersonal communication, right? So I often get energized by being around other people, and being forced to do it digitally. I'm finding that when I'm in the right headspace, I'm getting that same fulfillment by connecting in a space that's more comfortable to me, and I don't have to travel to talk to people, and I'm still getting that sense of human connection and fulfillment. Is any of you experiencing that as well?
Yeah, for sure. And also to that point, I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head that people in general are just craving more community. And something that I've noticed, especially with brick and mortar businesses, is that, before this happened, oftentimes with brick and mortar businesses, they kind of interact with their customers in a one-on-one setting, right? It's like you, the customer, buying something, and then you leave the shop, but you're not necessarily having community with the other customers who shop at that same place. Whereas now, like, for example, I am based out of Corvallis, Oregon, and I noticed that, online there have been Facebook groups like built around, like we have a group called Corvallis Culinary Connections, and it's like all the regulars who like go out to eat at their favorite restaurants. Now they're connecting with each other. They're sharing like, hey, these are my favorite items, takeout menu items. This is what I recommend if you're looking to, take your first dive into like Indian food. Like, this is like what you should order from this restaurant. And so I see that cross communication and support, whereas before it was more of like an isolated customer experience, and now it's a community customer experience.
That's beautiful. I even see, forgive me if I pronounce it wrong, but Nada over here say that she had a board of director meeting that was fully online and Zoom last week for the first time. And they had 1, more engagement, 2, better attendance, and 3, covered as much as they would have in a traditional meeting. So, I wondered if this is going to endure. Are we going to, at the very beginning, remember when this first started and people were like, now we're finally going to be able to figure out which meetings could have been calls, Is that going to endure a bit more?
I think so. I think part of this is also the accessibility of digital versus traveling. I mean, not everybody, like speaking of a board of directors meeting, not everybody can always get to it if you're distributed or dispersed company, but not everybody, but just about everybody can get online and join a Zoom meeting. So I think as we're seeing this become more and more efficient, and a lot of it was, as Alan said, jumping off the cliff and just figuring out how to make it work, how to make, this interaction work just as well as being in person. I think we're going to see a lot of that endure, and maybe even become more and more efficient with our meetings, and, use those emails when they to be emails and not meetings.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nada says it also helps if you have kids at home that can be your IT support. That's my point.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I definitely think this time is showing that people are more art than they are a science. So you need to make sure that you're not trying to just convince people to be in relationship with you, but just to be your authentic self. And then they'll naturally engage with you at the right time. And then they'll also be more open to sharing what their needs are with you. And then you'll be able to better support them with the services that you have available.
I love that. If you heard that, she said, people are more of an art than a science. I like that.
Yeah.
I mean, Casey, you say you kind of thought about stuff as an equation like that, are people more art than science? And how do we use that in our communication and connecting with people?
Well, that's a deep question.
Yeah.
It's both. I think everyone's has wiring that's this much the same. So I think the art part of it is really just appreciating the differences, and it's not a rubber stamp. And the differences are as varied as there are people.
I would also say that, and okay, I'm not an Enneagram expert, right? But this is something that I've gotten into more recently, just personality tests, is this idea that on the outside, people can have the same action or behavior, but their motivations for why they did it can be completely different. And I think understanding that helps you become a better communicator. And I'm going to, I don't remember the exact types, but there, for example, one of the ways you could look at it is if you are two different Enneagram types and both team members are very high achieving and performance oriented, one might be performance oriented because they crave security, and they believe if they perform well in their job, they won't lose their job. Whereas another person is high performing and achievement because they're achievement oriented, because they want to always be besting themselves, and they're competition driven. And so I think you need to understand what are the deeper layers of why people act the way that they do, and how do you utilize that in your communication with your team so that you're speaking to different, mindsets and personality types.
That's a really powerful observation. And I think we found that we're in kind of the geek culture, pop culture, gaming industry now. And we've had to have deep dives into what motivates people for gaming. Some people are very focused on competition. Some people love the interaction. Some people want to dominate with their power of strategy. And communicating to those subsets of a larger audience is really important, because what you want is for all those people at the same table to have a wonderful experience, right? And so, in any business, I think it's super important to identify the human elements and take the science and the art together, right? They're both important, but to really look a little bit deeper and what are the motivations behind why this is valuable. I think that's a really important observation. And
one thing that I want to hit on that I saw in the chat here, Casey said, I think a challenge of the current abrupt transition to digital is equity. We might be leaving some people behind. And then Alicia kind of bounced back on that and said, she's been trying hard from a business perspective to source locally as much as she can. But there's a little bit of that equity too. There's some businesses who are not far enough along that they're not digital and they're not online. And so, they're being left behind a bit too. So how do we deal with this? How do we deal with a bit of the inequity of people and businesses that maybe don't have the same access to digital communication and digital marketing tools?
Mm-hmm. I would add that some businesses are not ready to grow, so they don't have the right mindset to even take anybody's advice. And for them, we're going to see that they're not going to be successful during this time, unfortunately.
That's some of the tough love that we were talking about with Adrienne too, is that there is, anytime we've got a disruption like this, it is going to shake off some of the organizations that maybe might not have those deeper roots. But what do we do about the inequity of some that may not have access to it? Do we have an answer to that?
I think the most obvious example, it's not necessarily like access, or it is kind of access, but it's more like kind of the natural construct of your business, right? So the way we've seen it, the most obvious example of the way we've seen this is in, bars and restaurants. Those are businesses that have not ever had to rely on a digital connection presence before in the way that they have to do it now. And, some we've seen have chosen to just close together, to adapt. One of my favorite places downtown Vancouver is the Grocery, and one of the things I've loved what they've done through their social media is they have forced it to kind of to close their bar, so you can't come in for that happy hour to kind of connect. And bars have been a source of connection or community for such a long time. They've reached out and they've done creative things like, hey, show us what's in your cupboard, we'll recommend a drink. We're going to do our own digital happy hour. We're going to do ways that we're going to still connect with our audience, because that's where it becomes more about the why. The what is, yes, they serve great cocktails and food, but the why is we want to build community and connect with people and within that community. And so, the construct of your business, I think, really matters there, more than the inability to reach out digitally where you maybe don't have access before.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to the motivation and the mindset of the owner. Similar to what Ryan and Matt were saying. I mean, we get the question a lot of like, my demographic is 50 plus or, whatever, like they're not as digitally savvy. I mean, there's two things there. One, you're not prepping your business for like the other demographic, like the incoming demographic, the people that are in their 30s now that will be your target demographic soon. Or maybe you're limiting your business too much to where you're not reaching out to another audience because you've always done it this way. So that's how you want to do it. So I feel like if you have the motivation to adapt, then you're able to do it. There's always a way to connect with people. An example that keeps popping in my head here is, the pretty Christmas lights around PIR that happens every year. So one of the nonprofits that we work with actually, called Sunshine Division, purchased that. I want to say it's probably like 4 or 5 years ago now. And we did their websites. And again, they have a wide range of target demographic. Like they're like, how do we get the site to work on Internet Explorer 8 or whatever? Which most sites don't work on now. Their goal with that is literally like, we know we have this crazy diverse audience, and we get so many phone calls. How do we tailor this so we don't get any phone calls? We had to make everything big, bold, super easy to navigate, things like that. And that was them adapting instead of saying like, oh, well, like, that's just how it is. People will just call us. They gave that a shot and their call volume decreased pretty significantly. So again, I feel like it's just more of like a mentality and how motivated these businesses and organizations are to actually adapt versus like not having the chance to.
Mm-hmm. One way that they can adapt is, you gave an example of building partnerships. So seeking out communities who have the generosity gene to share and grow. And that is a way that they'll be able to thrive. But, if they stay to themselves or not open to partnerships, then unfortunately, they're not going to be able to survive during this time. And, maybe it's a good thing because they're not really showing good business practices.
Yeah, my observation there is that I think as people, we are reluctant to invest in something that we don't understand. And I've seen this throughout my career with businesses. It's fear-based, right? So I think education plays a big part. If we can, in our marketing and branding, if we can, in social media, if we can educate people and lower that barrier so that they feel more comfortable and more trusting in the system, they're really a lot more at ease with investing and taking their precious and sometimes very few dollars to something that they haven't done before. because I think that is the barrier that I've seen a lot, Ryan, with the things that you're talking about, is that when they're not ready, it's because they don't understand. Because I think if they do understand, which is, part of our job as creatives, it's much easier for them to go out on a limb and trust a little bit more.
I think Mark hit the nail on the head there with a lot of business owners, especially now, I would imagine, make decisions based out of a place of fear rather than opportunity. And I see this a lot, like, do you have a scarcity mindset or do you have an abundance mindset? And I think the businesses that pivot successfully are ones that have leaders who play offense in business instead of defense. If you're always reacting to what's going on around you, you're constantly playing defense in your business. Whereas people who have the foresight to push through and play offense, they have a totally different approach to the way that they run their businesses. So I think that's an important thing to kind of self-evaluate too. Like, am I playing offense or defense? Am I being reactive or proactive?
That's good, Tim. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Casey.
I think there's also an opportunity to simply recognize the deep ruts of the circles you're currently involved and connected to. There's maybe it's the certain coffee shop, it's a certain geography, it's a certain age demographic. If you recognize like your circle reality is consist of like this type, and then just being open to what you're not connected to, and recognizing any assumptions you have about that location, about that group of people, you're probably wrong. And so if you say, why in the world would I make any connections in Yakult? Or you're saying, I can't imagine a business on Fourth Plane. Any of those predisposed kind of thoughts you have, I think it's like, you know what? I'm probably wrong. I'm going to put myself and show up in ways that just is curious and seeks to find how to meet and help others thrive. And I'm positive you'll get something out of it, and they will be, also see a lot of value from things like that.
I'm not sure the last time I've seen a group of people all shake their heads or nod their heads so vigorously to being told they're probably wrong. But that is pretty true. I love that comment. Recognize your assumptions. You're probably wrong. Ryan, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was thinking about a client that I currently have. The first time I interacted with her was actually 2 years ago. And I was building her website, and we were set up to meet and go over everything. And she kind of disappeared. And I just started talking to her again, like 2 weeks ago. And she explained to me, that she had a lot of personal things that were going on in her life that distracted her from her goal and her purpose for showing up in this world. And, I welcomed her back with loving arms. And I was like, we can get a payment plan together. You can't pay right now. Like, what is going to work for you? So I think that that example shows like the generosity and love that we need to give, and compassion that we need to give to people who are having real life experiences during this time.
Yeah.
I want to talk for a second about innovation through connection. Okay. So there is a question that was submitted, and it's kind of a specific niche question, but I'd like to open it up in a more broad sense. It said, this was from Teresa Nunez, and I see that she's on here right now too. So she said, having a service-based business, how can I properly utilize the virtual world to build a passive income? And she says specifically, she's a commercial photographer. So let's put our self in her mindset as a commercial photographer who usually has to be present with people to get their job done. How can she start innovating using the digital platforms that are available?
I'd love to jump in on this one real quick, just because I've gone through a similar transition. So I can speak to personally how I approached this. So for the first 2 years of my business, just for context, like I was working primarily in a one-on-one done for you service context with clients. And since fall of last year, now I would say like 90% of my business is completely digital products versus clients. And the biggest shift that has really, I guess, skyrocketed my passive income. There's nothing truly passive in life. Let's first clarify that. Like passive is not maybe the right word, maybe more less time intensive, or residual could be, a better term to describe that. But I think that for her as a commercial photographer, if she's thinking about her, I guess her value ladder, right? Like working with her one-on-one as a client is really like the top end, her high ticket service. And if you're thinking, who are the people when they're first entering into her world, what do they need in that level of awareness, right? What is something small, like a tiny offer or a mini digital product that solves an immediate pain point for them? And then how can they achieve a specific result and a very specific win right out the gate, so that it builds instant trust and credibility in her expertise and services, so that, in the future, if they want to work with her on one-on-one, they're able to now already have an established relationship with her and be able to be, upsold into a one-on-one client. And I've done this, in my own business. I created like a $27 product that launched last month, and we've already brought in over 200 students in just that 30 days who wanted the immediate result from that small product, and now are people that I can work with in depth later on. And so I think that just to like do social listening, look back at our previous clients and think back to the beginning of what they wanted the most in that first interaction, and then think about how she can create a small product around that.
Yeah, that's good. I'll add to that too. I mean, like you said it really well, Ellen. It's about where can you bring value to the people that are interacting with your business, right? So for a photographer, it's not just about the actual photo that you're taking on their behalf. I mean, that's ultimately like what it is. But and we say this all the time. It just being in the creative agency business, like a lot of what we do, like designers, photographers, writers, coders. We're not the only ones who can do it, right? There's plenty of people in our field who can do that. It's whether they add value versus based on their expertise or their experiences, or or how we do that. We're doing that in our agency right now. We're talking about a photo shoot where we can't do a lifestyle shoot right now because we're all staying at home. So we're talking about ways we can be creative with the ideas right now. We're putting together mood boards. We're putting together concepts for the client to do that. But I think it's just finding different ways to add value, and that might even be like this is spitballing, but putting together like photo packs, right? Like you say, hey, here's like your Northwest landscape pack that you need for your website or your blog or something like that. Maybe here's your infinite white background, that you can superimpose stuff on it or something like that. But figuring out ways that you can add value while also being restricted from doing what you're providing the service that you're used to providing in a conventional way.
Also, differentiate and humanize your business. When I think about photographers, I think about how many photographers, at least I have been in contact with, right? There's a lot of saturation in that particular field. And I think if you could stay very busy differentiating and humanizing yourself and telling your story and making it personal, why are you passionate about this? What was it about going into that field to take that shot that really captured, and just get the emotional impact so that you can draw their heart as well as their head? Then they're drawn and they're curious and they want to know more. Even if they're not ready to buy your service, they've got you in their head. And I think that's a lot of times how business works. Sometimes it takes 7, 8, 9, 10 touches before somebody will take action. That's okay. Just plant those seeds.
That's good. Yeah.
Well, thinking a little bit about the sales cycle that you have, seeing that you're in commercial real estate, when that's all opened back up, maybe it is now.
It's commercial photography, but you can talk about commercial real estate if you like.
Oh, there you go. Well, the types of clients that you're working with, there's probably a longer sales cycle. And even though we're not allowed to do things right now, when those bans are lifted, the stay-at-home order is lifted, they're going to be running out the gates, fast. So right now, even if you're not able to go and actually do the shoot, you should probably be investing into like virtual consultations, still getting the ball rolling on the sales, to where you can have everything ready to go. So once everything is good to go, you already have all of those shoots that you can go and do, and and bang those out over time. Because people feel pent up too. They're wanting to move. They're going to want to move as soon as things are back to normal.
I want to do a quick reminder to everybody, all of the attendees, that we have the Q&A function down at the bottom of the Zoom menu here. So if you've got your Zoom screen open and you see the little Q&A, you can click that and you can add in some specific questions if you want me to ask them to anybody on the panel or to the panel as a whole. Put some questions in there and I will go to those. I want to kind of go back to something that Casey, you talked about in your talk, which is about the muscle that you have to grow in order to figure out how to see what others' success would look like. I know I'm not saying that right, but like being able to find out what motivates others to succeed. How do you stretch that muscle? Like Ellen was saying, how do you listen, do that social listening with your community to find out what they're actually looking for? How do we stretch this muscle, Casey? Be our trainer.
Well, just a few observations of myself. If it's hard to exercise that muscle when you don't know how you're going to make payroll tomorrow, and you run into somebody, and if your mindset is one where you're consumed by a sense of urgency for something you need, it's hard to get to that space. So I think it's really taking the time with great intentionality to, when you're physically looking at somebody, just wonder, I wonder what's going on in their head. I wonder what they struggle with. I wonder what they're scared of. I wonder what they're excited about. I make up a lot of stories about people. And I think for me, that's been healthy, because then that curiosity leads me to exercising that muscle. But it's hard if you don't take time to shift gears. Everyone looks like a project, and that's just dumb.
Because nobody likes to be treated like a project, but we do all want to be listened to.
I think it's really, piggybacking off of that, I think it's really important to connect both on like the personal level with anybody that you're working with, and also to define like those benchmark goals up front. That's something that we do on any engagement that you have with Gravitate, is we define what the end goal is, so we know like where we're being benchmarked. And with that, we also get to know our clients over time. We have some account managers that are really good at being like straightforward and analytical, to where I have a client off the top of my head that he's like, you guys send me these great reports. He's like, I care about 3 numbers. Just give me those 3 numbers. And now we spend the rest of the planning meeting talking about what they're doing next. Like, what's coming up? Like, what can we do? Like, we just need those 3 benchmark numbers and that's it. So it's really important to set those goals. Another example is we're helping a local business here shift to e-commerce and to do some digital ads to push out their offerings here locally. And that conversation started off like, well, what's your goal? Like, what's a good return on investment to where this is worth, continuing or scaling? Because our job is to get a good return on investment and then help you grow from there. So like, what's that benchmark goal? And if they don't have one, I'll make one for them. Like, based off of what you're saying, this is what our target goal is going to be, just so you know where that's actually going to be met.
I would just add that it's a process of going from wondering to actually just asking the client what their needs are. What is most relevant to you? And I think that question is really important, especially at this time, because for some of us, we're in the home and we have children around us who are screaming, they want to be fed. We have sick individuals in our home. So we need to go from wondering and start asking what's relevant to you. Like you gave it a wonderful example of that. So thank you for doing that.
Lacey, maybe another point is this takes a degree of, and everyone has it. I'm just thinking out loud, wisdom, because there's some people who are just emotionally expensive, and you need to be able to quickly assess, is my well-intentioned generosity going to be a black hole that's going to be something I can't crawl out of? So I think there's something in there that just being thoughtful about it. I have one quick question. This is my cheat question.
Okay, let's hear it.
So, first time meeting somebody, it's usually at some point I'm asking, hey, you know what? If we were going to meet here a year from now, what would you hope to say that in terms of you being really happy with your progress? So that question, it's not related to work. It's like whatever is important to them a year from now, they'll say it. And the other part is if they don't answer it, then in part, they might not like you because they can't envision meeting you again in a year. So if you can quickly questions like that, it's like, okay, good to meet you. Or they gush, they've just kind of given you the playbook of how to serve their needs.
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. Does anybody have other cheat questions that they use like that to help figure out who somebody is and what motivates them quickly?
I have like this, it's not my own like making, but I've heard, it's called FORD. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It's like family, occupation, relationships, dreams. And it's this idea that when you first meet someone, especially like in a networking setting, if you ask them, so tell me more about yourself, people will automatically default to one of those first three, like based on how they view their identity. So like if they start talking about their family, like, oh, well, I'm a mom and I have 3 kids and then like that's something really important to them that they like to talk about. Some people automatically default to what they do for work, occupation, and then other people default to recreation. Like they'll be like, oh, I love, like I'm really into, I'm hiking outdoors and like we go on hikes every weekend. And so it kind of gives you like an instant glimpse into how they root their identity. And then you can kind of dig further with questions, but it allows you to also be respectful of their boundaries so that if someone immediately comes to you with an answer about their family, you're not like, oh, but what do you do for work? Because maybe that's not what they want to talk about with you.
That's good.
Yeah, I think just asking questions, back to Don's dating advice from earlier, just asking questions about the person you're talking to versus talking about yourself. When I'm meeting with clients or just talking in general to somebody that I just met, I'm never like, oh, this is what I do, this is who we are, Gravitate's done this, blah. I'm trying to learn more about them as a person, what they do, whatever they want to talk about, and that helps create a better connection there, especially when it's authentic. If you're just blasting out like things about you, then that person feels like you're trying to sell them on something. And to Casey's point about everybody looking like a project, what I always say is like, we don't want to work with a client unless they want to work with us. There has to be a mutual understanding of like wanting to work together, because I don't want our team to come off as an expense. We're an extension of our client's team, not a payroll item or an expense item that they have to write off every month. And they view us as that. I probably don't want to work with that client because it's not going to end up being a good relationship.
Yeah. I just in a relational, if you look at it in the context of business, I mean, it's still a relationship, right? And so like Alan, what you're saying is like, we don't want to work with you if you don't want to work with us. It's more like looking for fit too, right? Like going to Casey's point as well, saying, don't look at everything as a project, and especially in times like this where, we get really motivated by fear and we look at opportunities that may come our way, you try and force fit it. You don't want to force it, because you really want to look at, and this goes for any business, I think, is this a good fit for my business to connect with in the spirit of partnership or interaction or something? Or is this aligned in a way that is going to be a good fit? We ask that on our end too. And, as a small business, we're always like, the next project is huge, but it has to make sense and be a good fit from a relational standpoint too. So I think that's kind of what you're saying too, Alan, is just, you want to have that mutual sort of attraction.
Well, I know Matt is similar to me because we used to share an office to where we get like unrealistically emotionally connected to all of our clients. So we're like, we'll go above and beyond and like not be able to sleep at night when we're thinking about our clients and what we can do. And there's been a lot of that lately, and trying to figure things out for them. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. One thing I want to identify real quick that I'm seeing is, we're talking a lot about people and about interpersonal communication. And what's interesting is perhaps a lot of people who aren't in marketing, they consider marketing as a promotional avenue, right? A way to sell. When in actuality, the best marketing is conversation, right? And so and the biggest part of conversation is that listening. And so it's something that I talk to people about with their social media content all the time. They want us to push out all these deals that they have going and these press releases that they're doing. And I'm like, like there's not even room in the calendar to ask how their day is going right now. We can't, that's our job to market, is to have a conversation. Would you all agree with that?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
That's one of the reasons that like that I love this business that I'm in, both in the sense of like building brands and marketing, because it's truly like at the end of the day, it's about connection, right? If you can connect with somebody in a meaningful way, not just broadcasting at them and hitting them with a bunch of like messages and, it's a one-sided conversation, but it's more kind of a transaction. You give me something, I give you something, you go back and forth. I love that because it like you can build businesses so effectively that way, grow your business, grow your client base just simply through connecting. And it doesn't always have to be a paid advertisement. It could just be a meaningful connection.
Yeah. I mean, with the amount of white noise and everything else out there in marketing, I mean, just being the one that actually listens to your client is going to differentiate you in a huge way. And not just listening, but also responding to what they're saying, seeing how you can help them with what they're needing, in any of those things, just being present for that conversation and know that you're not just trying to sell them something, you're actually trying to solve a problem or help them with something, and responding to that is huge.
Well, relating that to retail, and people don't approach their digital presence online the same way they would in a store. Like when you're visiting somebody's store online and they're just like 20% off, 30% off, 40% off, like all these things, all these deals, free shipping. And also we're doing this thing. Like it's way too much. Like you wouldn't do that in person. If I was walking into a retail shop, you would be like, hey, just to let you know, 30% off bikinis. I'm like, what are you talking about? What I care about is, hey, these are locally made. Like you're supporting people in Portland, or, you're supporting people in Vancouver. I want more about the experience, and you wouldn't treat your customers that way in person. So why would you treat them like that on social or online?
Let's go, Mark, and then Casey. I see you both there ready.
Building a community is not transactional, right? I think a lot of people have a hard time turning off the sales machine. You should be selling. You have a product. I mean, you have something you're bringing into the world, and it has value, and I love that. But I'll give some props to my team. Like one of the things that I've noticed my team do, and again, we're in the pop culture industry, is we're not saying, here's our product, it's for sale, here's where to get it. You have to be clear in those things. However, the types of posts we'll have is we'll post an illustration of this fungal planet, and it might have a caption to it that says, what happens when you eat this glowy mushroom? Right?
My favorite is describe what it smells like here.
Yeah. And so people
really creative questions.
Hundreds of engagements, and it'll be like, well, do you sprout an additional appendage? Do you float into the atmosphere? Like what happens? And then over time, what happens is people have a space where they have a voice and they get to participate in a community and they feel part of it. And there's a human connection, point of this pillar, this section, that pulls them and draws them to be part of your brand. And it's not transactional. It doesn't mean that they have to buy your product right now, but they will. They will eventually, and probably, or they're going to say, hey, have you guys seen what's going on over here? And I think that long-term view and perspective is really important for a lot of businesses right now, because they have a really hard time turning off the sales filter and trying to sell something or be I mean, you are trying to sell something, but you don't want to be overly salesy. Right. With the way that you approach
Ryan has a quick comment to piggyback off that, and then we'll go to Casey.
I didn't know he was finished speaking.
I like to cut him off. That's our relationship. Enough jibber jabber. That's enough.
Oh, okay. I just want to add, it's important to not convince at this time, but just be your authentic self. And I don't really believe that people are sales funnels. It's about those relationships that you build.
People aren't sales funnels. Woo! Okay, Casey, go ahead. Also, my cold brew is kicking in, if you can't tell.
Well, I think the only thing I was going to mention, something that Ellen referenced, and maybe part of a secret sauce we use. So there's the science and the art. We use a diagnostic tool with our clients that essentially tells us how they're wired in terms of their motivations. Mm-hmm. It also tells us communication style they prefer. So there's the blanket approach that's generous. And then I think for us, we found a lot of success in understanding the nuances of each person. So for some, they might not really want any of the, hey, how's the family? How's that hiking trip? Because their wiring is like, damn it, just get to the point. It doesn't mean they're like, don't have a relationship. It's just, that's how they're wired. And so, and maybe later for whomever, I'm happy to share more, but I think there's really some great ways like Enneagram to know how people are wired, and use the science of it.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a couple questions here in the Q&A function that I'd like to share. So panelists, if you want to see the text of those, you can click that Q&A function too. I'm going to go to, which one do I want to start with? I want to go to one of Valerie's questions that's pointed towards Ellen, but there's a couple other people who can speak to this too. When you talked about pivoting, that big pivot from mostly client work, bringing in your revenue and income, to some of your own products, bringing in revenue and income, how did you make those first steps? How can it feel doable to somebody? Because a lot of people, it seems like that's just, a pie in the sky dream. So what are the first steps to make that kind of pivot?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I am a very scrappy person, so I like to, keep things as simple as possible. So I think the first thing is, if you're a service provider and you're going to create a digital product, whether that's a course, a membership site, or something, something along those lines, the biggest thing I always recommend to people is to get paid to create. Meaning, don't put in all this upfront work, spending hours recording these video modules and writing out all these worksheets and yada, yada, yada. And then putting it out there into the market and hoping that people will buy. Because it's oftentimes, unless you are so clear on your messaging and you already have, something else that's converting, you're going to be disappointed by the reaction you get. And you may have put in a lot of upfront time and money into creating a product that doesn't sell. And so what I recommend instead is, like, for example, when I first started my membership, all I did literally was I do this process called message mining, where I just asked a ton of questions to my audience, like in Instagram DMs and story polls. I got on the phone with people and I was just trying to ask them, like, what are the things that prevent you from having success in XYZ, and just really trying to get clear on that. And then based on their answers, I just came up with like a topic outline of 9 things that came up over and over and over again. And I honestly posted on Instagram stories and I said, hey, do you struggle with whatever? And it was like a poll, like people to answer yes, no for the things. And I said, okay, great. And then I messaged like all the people who said yes. And I said, okay, I'm launching a course around these 9 topics. I'd love, to give you an opportunity to be a founding member. I'm going to live teach the content with you guys in a Facebook group each week, so that you actually you want to make them feel like VIPs, right? You have an integral role. Your feedback plays into the final version of the content, and you get it at a super discounted rate. I'm not going to be teaching this content live again. People who join later on, they're just going to get the recorded content. And you don't have to make it big, like your beta group, your founding students, whoever. It can be small. I think mine was just 12. And it's great because it's like a proof of concept to see if your idea and your messaging will even sell. You get literally paid to create your content, and then you actually get better content out of it because of the feedback from your beta members. And, now I host everything through Kajabi. It's like, I love Kajabi. And so if anyone needs help with that, feel free to message me. I'm happy to help you. But when I first started, everything was just organized in a free Facebook group. I had zero upfront costs. So if you have internet, if you have Facebook and an idea, you can totally get started today without a lot of upfront investment in time or resources.
Mark, it sounds a lot like crowdfunding. It's like you put up an idea and you've made significant progress on an idea, but you invite people in before it's really ready, and then they get to be a part of that process.
Yeah, we've gone there. Kickstarter and crowdfunding is a whole nother topic probably, because it's an early adoption model, and you're asking people to trust you before the thing is actually in the world. So actually building that trust up front, it actually does become really, really important. And what we've done in our last few very successful crowdfunding campaigns is we have, during the campaigns are generally like 3 or 4 weeks, we will create full engagement where the community actually gets to influence the product that they're funding. And it's been very, very wildly effective. And the conversations then that follow sometimes are like, wow, these guys actually care about what we think. And we implement that and it actually does a lot of our research for us. It makes our product stronger. It creates more engagement. Listening is just really the tool, right? It just really is the tool. It kind of goes all the way back to, square one. And then creating and investing in the tools and processes that you need to listen, and then document that and apply that and put that into process, and then communicate that back, is something to be mindful about as well.
Okay, so I have another question on here that I would love to look at from Lindsay. Speaking of connecting with clients, where do you meet them? Is there a place you find useful to find leads? And how about now, like during COVID-19? So I have a quick answer on this that's very social media specific. So think about some of your answers while I'm going here. So one thing that is super useful on Instagram specifically, and I use this for most of my clients and our own brands, is location tags. Okay. So whenever people post on Instagram, a lot of people use a location tag. So if there's a region that your target demographic is in, then you can search the posts that include location tags. And once again, you actually have to read through the content that person is posting, read through the content, and you don't have to go follow that person in order to get them to follow you back, but because let's think about it like common sense. How awkward would it be if you were like walking around Vancouver and then you just started following someone because you wanted them to follow you back? That's so awkward, right? But you might say, hi, I see you're wearing this sweater. I love that sweater. And just have a conversation. Then they might ask you what you do. And it's so funny. People don't think of marketing as like making friends, but that's kind of what it is. How would you try to make friends? But you can low-key stalk them on Instagram location tags, is all I'm saying. That's where I find prospective clients, and I compliment whatever they're doing and try to open up conversation, and that's where I'm finding a lot more leads. So who else has something that they can share on that vein?
I'm not go ahead.
You
First.
go. Okay.
Ryan, then Alan.
It takes teamwork. I would say that my clients come from a variety of places. Twitter, I'm really active on there. So people see me as a thought leader on there. So they'll share my links with other people. Also on Facebook is where I get a lot of my clients. Definitely LinkedIn, as well as from my other clients. They'll share their experiences. So like one client that I have, every person in her household has got a service from me because of the quality that I give and the love and compassion that I give to my clients and making sure that they're growing in whatever they're interested in.
Awesome. I was going to say, I'm not like, I would say I'm not like the classic salesperson. I mean, technically sales is a portion of my job, but I don't go out and do networking, and I'm really awkward at networking events. Casey can attest to that. Like I don't go and talk to people and be like, hey, it's me. Here's my 5-minute spiel or whatever, what we do. I prefer, I do a couple of tactics. One, I just generally check in with my network of people that I haven't talked to in a long time. Shoot them a text, shoot them an email, and just say, hey, let's catch up. No agenda of selling anything, just because it's crazy how far people go in 6 months, 12 months, or even a couple of years, and check in with them. Two, I'm a huge believer of just sharing knowledge. So pushing things out as much as I can. LinkedIn is a huge tool for that. So like my mom doesn't get crowded with my work stuff on my Facebook, but pushing that out there. And then three, one thing that I accidentally fell into was finding common ground through nonprofits or just community-based events. I'm just, again, a huge fan of our community here and a huge believer of being involved in nonprofits. And through that, organically, you meet people and everybody has an interesting story, or they do something interesting for a living. And from there, it just kind of organically sprouts. I've had people that I've met, at an event a year ago. They're like, hey, we talked at like this random thing. I don't know if you remember me, but like, here's the thing. Do you guys do this? And they'll reach back out and I'll be like, oh, cool. Good to hear from you. And that's just another way to connect with people. I guess it's common ground there, but yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say the nice thing about meeting over nonprofits is usually there's a value alignment there, right? Yeah. And so it kind of pre-vets a partner by knowing that you've got this value alignment happening.
For sure.
One thing mentioned in the chat section over here too was LinkedIn groups, and Ryan doubled down on that. So there's LinkedIn groups available and creating content on LinkedIn. But again, I'm always gonna push for exactly what you all have been saying. Creating that content and pushing it out is only a slice of what you should be doing, because you also should be listening, engaging with other people's content, or else you're that annoying person at the networking meeting that just talks about themselves and never listens. So.
Yeah,
exactly.
As a reminder, real quick, we've got about 9 minutes left in this section of the panel. So if you have any other specific questions that you want us to answer, you can put those into the chat box. Let's see. Greg asked a question here that I want to answer live. It's posed to Mark. Mark, what is your funding model for creating basically for crowdfunding? So he wants to know, are you using GoFundMe? What are you doing to do crowdfunding?
Well, there's a long answer. I'll try to keep it high points. There's a lot of learning that is associated with bringing a product to market through. We used Kickstarter, and the first time I did it, I felt I was very thorough with the product, and I had all kinds of branding background and expertise. I had really good, content and all of that. But what I didn't have was the trust of the industry, because I was new. And I hadn't taken the time to build a community or a crowd that would fund it. And so one of the things I did early on is I read books and I listened to influencers in the industry about how to build a crowd. And, I think this is very relevant for anything in the retail, anything where you're dealing with customers instead of clients, right? And I think the most important thing I would say is take the time, and sometimes it's a long time, to plant those seeds, cultivate them, and let them grow, so that you have a group of people with common values and ideas, and people who want to participate in what you're doing and are kind of with you when you get to the point where you're actually ready to bring something into the world. There's already anticipation. It's like the movie trailers that you see, this is coming in summer of 2021, you'll be prepared for it. So when it comes, they're ready. It's very rare that you can spring something as a new brand, or, to somebody who's never seen you before, and have them be ready to part with their dollars immediately. So the most important thing I think in terms of how we think about getting the word out is creating engagement on all the social platforms that are relevant for that particular vertical. Not all channels are relevant for every vertical. It's a very complex. I'm not an expert there. Some of you guys are, but I don't know if that answered anything. I just felt like I rambled, but community, crowd, creating a group of people that feels, enthusiastic about the things that you do, and being very, low barrier, opening that up to everybody is very, very important, well ahead of the time that you're actually trying to sell in a crowdfunding situation.
It's almost similar to Ellen saying, before she was selling her product, she was asking people on Instagram, which of these things are you struggling with? She's like, I'm thinking about doing this, but I need some more data, right? And it doesn't have to be some big data mining project. It's just reaching out to the network that you have and starting to gather that data.
It does grow too, and it pays off in the long term. Again, there's a long view to this. The first time we did it, I think we funded for like $211,000 on a game, and I lost my mind. I thought, this is incredible, even though our gross yield or our net yield out of that was very small. But it's just got exponentially bigger year after year since then, because the same crowd is growing. We're cultivating a group of people that we care about and that care about us, and it's much bigger than the product now. It's more about the brand.
We had a couple people ask in the chat section, and we're going to be sending out some resources after the event. And a couple people were asking Casey about that tool for people's communication styles. And a couple people have now asked for some of the book recommendations that you read, Mark, when preparing for crowdfunding. So we will make sure we get some of that content in the post-event resources. Okay, let's see. Do we have any closing thoughts? There's no more questions sitting in the Q&A. My bio break is calling me.
I do have one quick thought, just kind of a flip side of, we've talked a lot about utilizing your strengths and understanding yourself and being honest with yourself. And I think, and how that can create connections by, asking how do people need help. I think on the flip side is also being honest with yourself on your weaknesses and understanding you are going to create connections by asking for help yourself. It's not a sign of weakness. It's just you realize that you do need to create that connection, and you don't know what's going to come from it, but you're going to get help either way. So just figured I'd throw that out there on the flip side of the strength part.
You got snaps from Ryan on that one. Mm-hmm.
I'll take the snaps.
Mm-hmm. Jeremy says that's gold too. That's almost the same idea of that bringing your vulnerability first too, Yeah. Exactly. That's when people, it's so interesting, isn't it? How our vulnerabilities and our insecurities, when we are open with them, they actually attract help and attract a network of what we're looking for. Mark says invites trust. That's such a good point. It builds this bridge. Right. It's beautiful. Good job, everybody.
It lets people know you're human.
Mm-hmm. Which is important, because who wants to have a relationship with a robot? Nobody. It's horrible.
Right. Or a project.
Or a project. That's just dumb.
Unless you're Casey, you're superhuman, which is fine. He's going to hate me so bad at the end of this. I'm just going to keep praising him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everybody. So we're going to call that good for panel number 2. So all of you panelists, thank you so much. You brought so much good content and showed up really strong here. So we are now going to get prepared to move into lunch break. Okay, so we're getting good claps. Mark, Casey says he loves you. I don't know. There's a love-hate thing happening right now. I don't know what it is. So great job, everybody from panel 2. We are going to go ahead and break for about 30 minutes. So we will reconvene at 1 p.m. and get started with section number 3.